I take it he was agreeable?
He didn't really have a choice.
Has he been infected?
Oh yes, most certainly.
This plague, the rioting is intensifying to the point where we may not be able to contain it.
Why contain it? Let the bodies pile up in the streets. In the end, they'll beg us to save them.
I have received reports of armed attacks on shipments. There's not enough vaccine to go around, and the underclasses are starting to get desperate.
Of course they're desperate. They can smell their death, and the sound they'll make rattling their cage will serve as a warning to the rest.
I hope you're not underestimating the problem. The others may not go as quietly as you think.
The H1N1 virus has made thousands of people across the country sick. Many have died, and some worrying that it could grow into a full-blown pandemic. Well, one state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is preparing for that with a very controversial bill. Massachusetts proposing legislation that would allow police to forcefully quarantine residents and even impose martial law without a warrant.
Back now with two quick updates on a story that began this broadcast last night, the predicted quick and rapid spread of swine flu in this country and around the world. The U.S. military considering a plan that could establish regional military teams to assist civilian authorities in the event of a major outbreak of the virus this fall.
Now, what do you think of the vaccination?
You know, I have more concern about the vaccine than I do about the swine flu. It's been rushed to market. There are high levels of adjuncts which basically make it more potent, so they can, it's kind of an unrefined method that they use. They had to use high levels of these adjuncts, including
thimerosal. It's an antiseptic preservative, and hasn't that been linked in some cases to autism?
It has, and you look, it's been shown to cause autism in children with mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, and other is controversial, though highly implicated. And the problem is you don't know if your child has mitochondrial dysfunction. I also worry about children and people who have blood-brain barrier dysfunction or it's not fully developed, which include children, pregnant women, chronic neurological illnesses, and chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. I've seen these people have been devastated by these infections.
All right, would you give it to your kids?
I definitely would not.
You would not. All right. And in fairness, I've talked to 3 doctors in 3 days now, and all 3 have said absolutely they would give it to their kids. They intend to give it to their kids. They're going to take it themselves, but you say no.
I definitely would not. I've seen it devastate people with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, highly implicated, again, in autism. I think you're rolling the dice. It's a proven neurotoxin, has 25,000 times the level of mercury than would be considered toxic if it was a food or water.
26-year-old Desiree Jennings is the picture of health. She's a Redskins cheerleader ambassador and an avid runner. Her life changed forever on August the 23rd when she says she got a seasonal flu shot at a local grocery store.
I was training for a half marathon and it all went so fast.
10 days after receiving the shot, she came down with the flu. After that, her health spiraled downwards. She started passing out and had to be hospitalized twice.
Yeah, we went to an urgent care facility and they wouldn't even let her get out of my truck because she was seizing in the back, so they called an ambulance immediately.
Doctors at Fairfax Inova and Johns Hopkins diagnosed her with a rare neurological disorder called dystonia. They think it was caused by a severe reaction to the flu shot. She now has difficulty speaking, walking, even eating. During our interview, she had several seizures. The effects are irreversible.
Symptoms will get worse if I use my voice or walk when the brain signals are misfiring.
American parents would make very different decisions about how they vaccinate their children were they given the proper information.
One of the reasons that I'm here is the toxicity of vaccinations as they have been used for such a long time in this country.
It's not in the best interest of your children. You're going to be trading some innocent types of diseases that we now know how to handle better for other problems such as allergies, asthma, even autism for years to come.
You do only one thing in the next few months that is to protect you and your family, then do this. Don't have the vaccine. Don't have the vaccine. Tell as many people as you can, don't have the vaccine. Get on the internet, check it out. Go to my website. You'll see the charges that have been filed with the FBI against this group of people and organizations. This is the idea, because they want to dramatically reduce the number of people in the world, and they also want to access the body and therefore destabilize it mentally, emotionally, and physically. This is why we've had this explosion of vaccines for kids, to the point now where they're having 25 or more before the age of 2, yes, in America and Britain and elsewhere. And this is pouring total shite into a still emerging immune system. You've got a growing, developing immune system, and you're saying the first 2 years of life, have some of that, darling.
She's the beautiful cheerleader whose heartbreaking story is shocking the nation. 25-year-old Desiree Jennings showed me how she can't walk without twisting, jerky movements. But she walks backwards normally. Doctors say she has a rare 1 in a million neurological disorder that was triggered 10 days after she got a seasonal flu shot.
Started with me not being able to eat without passing out.
You couldn't eat without passing out? I visited Desiree and her husband Brendan at their home in Ashburn, Virginia, to see what their daily life is like. She has to go up and down stairs backwards because something as simple as walking forward can be dangerous.
And here's the unusual part about the disorder. Take a look at this. Desiree can run just fine. It's only when she stops. You see, that's where the spasms start. Now you can walk backwards though, and it'll make it better, right?
Yeah.
She runs with a normal stride, and as I ran with her, she even spoke normally.
And now you can talk.
Yeah, it's weird. It fixes as soon as I start running.
I mean, you sound.
I know, it's great, isn't it?
You sound amazing. And then you stop, and that's what happens.
Desiree got a flu shot on August 23rd. 10 days later, she came down with what doctors have diagnosed as dystonia, a rare neurological disorder. Her jerking and twisting are the result of uncontrollable muscle contractions. There is no known cure.
Are y'all ready?
Yes.
This is home video of Desiree as a beautiful bride when she married Brendan 2 years ago. And this is a photo when she was training to be a cheerleader for the Washington Redskins. Doctors say what happened to Desiree should discourage people from getting flu shots. But here's what the woman who's on the wrong side of being 1 in a million says.
Running has to be a relief.
The only thing I have left.
The only thing you have left.
Hello, I'm Dr. Leonard Horowitz, and this is an urgent news bulletin about a new flu that is said to be making its way from Mexico into the United States as I broadcast. Skyrocketing stock values at Novavax Inc., precipitated by dozens of flu deaths in Mexico, implicates a leading Anglo-American network of genetic engineers in a conspiracy to commit genocide. Dr. James S. Robertson, England's leading bioengineer of flu viruses for the vaccine industry, an avid promoter of U.S. government funding for lucrative biodefense contracts, along with collaborators at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, helped Novavax Inc. in Bethesda, Maryland, produce genetically modified recombinants of the avian, swine, and Spanish flu viruses H5N1 and H1N1, nearly identical to the unprecedented Mexican virus that has now spread to the United States. The outbreak was precisely timed to promote the company's new research and huge vaccine stockpiling contracts. The outbreak was precisely timed to promote the company's new research and huge vaccine stockpiling contracts. Scientists at the CDC are implicated through collaborations and publications involving private contracts with Novavax, a company that obtains its, quote, biosimilars through the CDC Influenza Branch Director Ruben O'Donis and Dr. Rick Bright, previously working with Donis at the CDC, now Novavax's Vice President of Global Influenza Programs. Evidence for this conspiracy to commit deadly duplicity in the vaccine industry includes the genetic markers on the novel flu virus now spreading from Mexico to America.
Well, are you sitting down? Baxter International, an Illinois-based pharmaceutical company, was caught shipping live avian flu viruses mixed with vaccines to 18 countries last week. Of course, health officials are asking how this could be, as it can't happen by accident. Why? Because Baxter International adheres to Biosafety Level 3. That's a set of safety protocols that prevent the cross-contamination of materials, which means it was done purposely.
So what was Baxter doing mixing live avian flu viruses, both H5N1 and H3N2, which is the human form, with standard flu vaccine material? And who authorized it? The tainted vaccines were received by labs in a number of Eastern European countries, and some are wondering whether the contamination was part of a deliberate attempt to start a pandemic. The avian flu virus on its own has killed hundreds of people, but when combined with ordinary flu viruses, which are easily spread, the effect is a potent, super airborne, super deadly biological weapon with a 60% plus kill rate.
And check this out. On the same day the story broke, officials at the National Emergency Management Summit released a statement saying it was no longer an if issue, but when there would be an avian flu pandemic. One could only wonder if they knew what was going on at Baxter. And in a chilling hint of what's planned to deal with a pandemic, whether it's natural or man-made, health officials say it's important for all citizens to be prepared for the possibility of being quarantined for months at a time.
We have an incredible defense system called the human immune system. And when that is strong and in optimal efficiency, it keeps us well. It gets rid of foreign attacks on the body. If you undermine the human immune system, or you stop it developing properly so it's undermined for life by throwing all this stuff at under twos, then you open people up to getting illnesses and being killed by things that the immune system in its true optimal state would deal with easily. There is a war on the human immune system, because when that goes down, we go down. Because we ain't going to live for long if that's not working properly. And they're targeting the kids from a very, very early age. And that's what this is all about, on one level. But on another level, this is about a cull of the population. I'm not saying for a second that vast numbers of people will keel over overnight. That would be too bloody obvious. But the effects of this vaccine, as people move forward, is going to manifest itself in lots of different ways. It's more likely that there will be effects of many and various kinds, because the body is an electrochemical organism, and it has an optimum electrochemical balance, and we call that health. When you imbalance that through introducing chemicals and electromagnetic sources, then you move it from optimum, and it no longer works correctly, emotionally, mentally, or physically. And if you look at the cumulative chemical onslaught, particularly on children, but people in general, in food, drink, soft drinks, and mobile phones and all that stuff on the electromagnetic side, humans are being bombarded. There's a war on our children's minds, there's a war on our children's immune systems, and there's a war on our children's emotional balance. And it's connected into all these different areas of food, of drink, and of vaccines, of pharmaceutical medicines. They invent diseases so that problem, or in this case, no problem, reaction, solution. Take this.
I began looking at vaccine toxicity years before I had my first child, back in the 70s. And back then there was enough information for us to see that the whole theory of vaccines could be terribly flawed, and that by dumping stuff into the blood could in fact cause some severe long-term illnesses.
So the current climate of vaccine science is very controversial. The information that we're being given, that I was taught in medical school, is not consistent with safety and efficacy. As we see the number of vaccines being added to the schedule, we're also seeing a tremendous increase in the number of chronic illnesses in children.
the time being, over 180,000 people across the country have been diagnosed with different respiratory diseases, and the situation seems to be really, really serious for the time being.
Well, as we can see, Alexei, the virus is spreading in Ukraine. But what about the people? What do they think about the situation? Is there a sense of panic among them?
Yes, that's what we feel here in the Ukrainian capital. I'd like to remind that 9 regions of Ukraine remain under quarantine. This includes Kiev. All schools and universities have been closed till further notice. That could be about 3 weeks, and people are here on the ground are starting to panic. Over the weekend they have swept all the anti-flu medication off the shelves of drugstores. Respiratory masks, which also were available on Friday and Thursday, also cannot be found now in Kiev, even though every third person in the streets of Kiev is wearing those masks. At the same time, people, as I mentioned, do not know what to expect of this outbreak. Some say that this is somehow connected to the ongoing presidential election campaign in Ukraine. As long as all mass activities have been cancelled in the country, this is of course a serious blow to the campaign and to politicians taking part in it. But of course all the authorities are saying that human lives come first, and now everyone is trying to deal with this disease as soon as possible.
All right, Alexei Rashevsky, thanks very much indeed for bringing us the latest from the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, on the spread of flu there.
My concerns are the absence of any adequate safety studies looking at the long-term detrimental effects of vaccines used in childhood, and the almost cavalier continuance of the process of introducing more untested vaccines into a schedule of vaccination that is already appalling in terms of its scientific underpinning.
It's about the manipulation of our perception of everything, because our perception leads to our behavior and our actions. If you're going to control someone's actions, then you need to control their perception, because that controls their actions, and the perception they want people in more than anything is danger, danger, danger. Because once you get someone in fear of something, they will look outside of themselves for something or someone to protect them from what they've been manipulated to fear. So get them to fear swine flu, they will then say, save me from swine flu, okay,
thank you very
give
much.
us your arm.
Good night.
Right, give us your children's arm. Oh no, yeah. Oh darling, you must be vaccinated, the swine flu's coming. Yeah. Pathetic. All people have got to do, go on the internet and put in 1976 swine flu conspiracy or words to that effect, or go into YouTube and see the adverts they put out in '76 to frighten people into being vaccinated for an epidemic that did not happen, and the consequences of it. People died, people had their minds scrambled. It was, and they want to do that now on a massive scale. What they do, you see, is they have their version of trials. They've got a big version of something coming, but further down the line, or back down the line, they try it out. And what they're looking for is, will the public do it? Will the public stand for it? Will the public react the way we want?
Some say it began in the spring of 1918, when soldiers at Fort Riley, Kansas burned tons of manure. A gale kicked up. A choking dust storm swept out over the land. A stinging, stinking yellow haze. The sun went dead black in Kansas. 2 days later, on March 11th, 1918, an Army private reported to the camp hospital before breakfast. He had a fever, sore throat, headache, nothing serious. 1 minute later, another soldier showed up. By noon, the hospital had over 100 cases. In a week, 500. That spring, 48 soldiers, all in the prime of life, died at Fort Riley. The cause of death was listed as pneumonia. The sickness then seemed to disappear, leaving as quickly as it had come.
I strongly advise against getting the H1N1 flu vaccine. It is not a very serious illness. The swine flu vaccine has both aluminum and mercury in it, which are both neurotoxins. Squalene may be added. Squalene is an adjuvant that stimulates your immune system to attack itself. It has been associated with Gulf War syndrome in 2 papers.
Do you know that with these chemical trails, in the morning, there's actually little spots, little flakes on my car of silver and pink. I don't know if it's from the barium, the aluminum. They put aluminum in the sky. Aluminum causes Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease in the brain. And there's a lot of people where I live who are dying. Cancer. Oh, the place is overridden by cancer. Cancer and a lot of respiratory problems. Do you have silver skies where you live most of the time? It's been a bad summer. I haven't been able to use the pool this summer that much at all. What are they putting in the sky? Is it something to help us? Or is it something that's going to hurt us?
It is not a very serious illness. It's less bad than our seasonal flu. Please do take your vitamin D, your vitamin C, eat healthy, eat organic, get lots of sleep, drink lots of water. That's much safer than taking the vaccine.
Is it because of the swine flu? Or is it because of global warming? I don't know. I'm not usually one of them conspiracy guys. And that's what you're going to call me for making a chemical trail video. But it is so obvious. You know, it isn't like something that's not tangible. You can look up in the sky and see it. Hey, the sun is trying to break through. It's finally breaking through a little bit. I think the government owes us some answers. If you notice, meteorologists never talk on TV about it. But meanwhile, they know it's there.
These waivers have also been issued for pandemic influenza vaccines of a number of types. What that means is that if you are injured from one of these H1N1 vaccines or another pandemic vaccine, you have no access to the legal system.
So because apparently they're worried that swine flu is a public safety issue, they're talking about a law where the police can knock on your door.
Right.
Or not necessarily knock on your door, just go in and essentially quarantine you.
Well, they're doing more than talking about a law. The state of Massachusetts, both houses of the legislature have enacted this law, and once Governor Deval Patrick signs it, and he says that he will, it'll become the law, and it will allow him to declare an emergency. And once he declares an emergency, he can authorize non-healthcare licensed personnel, read that to mean police,
sure,
to vaccinate people against their will. Now, can they force adults to take vaccination? No. They will incarcerate adults without a trial, without charges, without even a search warrant, who refuse to be vaccinated. This is what the statute authorizes. It also authorizes the statute also authorizes the police to remove children from adults, vaccinate them against the will of the child and the will of the parents.
This is so troubling on so many different levels. I mean, first of all, you think, wait a minute, they've got a great big list with everybody who got a flu shot's name on it, and are they going to just have neighbors turn into other neighbors? Hey, they're sick.
Well,
they haven't gotten the shot.
It's interesting you say that. There is not a clause in the statute that requires you to report a neighbor, but the government will encourage people to do it. Look, this is the reason why we have federal judges, because federal judges in Massachusetts will have to take this statute and compare it to the Constitution. And the Constitution says the police can't break into your home, and the police can't take your children away from you, and parents decide what medication the children get, not the government.
You can look up in your sky on any number of days and see the airplanes laying them down, no matter where you live. And not only that, it's not only happening in this country, it's happening in 40 different countries, probably all the NATO countries. Is this a United Nations thing? Are they doing this for global warming? Or are they doing this to stop the swine flu epidemic? Are they hurting us with these or helping us? I would like to know. I think the government owes us an explanation. After all, we are the people.
As swine flu continues to spread across the world, so do theories about its origin. U.S. investigative journalist and RT contributor Wayne Madsen says he's gathering more and more evidence that the H1N1 virus started out in a lab. Well, he's now in Washington with RT's Priya Sridhar. Priya, tell us, what new proof is there to support this theory?
That's right, Bill. Well, we've been talking a lot about the swine flu in the past couple months, and just recently the first shipment of the swine flu vaccines have been available in the United States. But now we're learning more information on how the H1N1 virus actually came to exist here in this country. And joining me to talk more about it is RT contributor and investigative journalist Wayne Madsen. Wayne, thanks so much for joining me. So first of all, tell me, what have you learned about how the H1N1 virus came to exist here in this country?
Well, it's very apparent that there's three research centers involved in the development in a laboratory of the 1918 Spanish flu, which was actually resurrected. The proper name should be the Jurassic flu. It was resurrected from the DNA extracted from an Inuit woman who died of this pandemic in 1918 in Brevig Mission, Alaska. The material was taken to several laboratories, and what I've discovered is that three particular laboratories are very much involved in this research. The University of Madison at Wisconsin, the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and something that might surprise a lot of people, the St. Jude's Veterinary Research Laboratory in Memphis, Tennessee. So we have three places now that seem to be ground zero for the research that led to the redevelopment or resurrection of the 1918 Spanish flu.
If we're going to look at food, if we're going to look at the plastics in the environment, the heavy metals, the pollutants, the perfumes, the skincare products, antibiotics, we must be open to the possibility that not only is it the vaccination itself, the introduction of materials that are foreign to the body past the natural immune system, but we also must entertain the possibility that some of the byproducts of vaccine manufacturing also make it into the body and destroy or impair or contribute to the destruction or impairment of our children's systems.
Well, I think what we have here is a situation with bioethics. They talk a good game in the medical research community about bioethics, but it doesn't seem like there's any method to enforce the ethics. And if, in fact, this was developed to make money for certain biopharmaceutical companies, of course, this is a case of bioterrorism. It may be bioterrorism sought, but many people have died around the world from this. Right now, it doesn't appear that the FBI or any other law enforcement agency is actively investigating it, which brings up the anthrax case, which some people say that was not adequately investigated either.
Looks like our government is getting us pretty upset and concerned about the swine flu. This is interesting to me, not only for political reasons, but also as a physician. It makes me think back to 1976, the first year I served in the Congress. We had a vote on the swine flu. Back then, there was a panic, and they said it was going to sweep the nation, and they rapidly came up with some flu shots, and the government was going to inoculate everybody and save the world from this disaster. And I remember there were two votes against it, myself and Larry McDonald, another physician. It turned out, though, that our instincts were correct. Not only did we object to it because we didn't think the government should be in the medical business and making these medical decisions, but it turned out that the instincts were absolutely right because the flu came and the flu went and one person died, except for those individuals who died from getting the flu vaccine.
We had a case in May where a scientist from the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg was caught bringing Ebola and HIV DNA across the U.S.-Canadian border at Pembina, North Dakota, was arrested, apparently was freed. He was on his way to the National Institutes of Health right outside of Washington, D.C. There also was a case where a Japanese researcher involved in the same research was caught taking H1N1 DNA out of Surabaya Airport in Indonesia to Japan. Japan is also involved in some of this research.
Some pretty interesting revelations, and we'll certainly keep you updated on anything we hear from Washington, D.C. I'll be back here next hour for another live update, but for now, Bill, it's back to you.
Priya, thanks very much indeed. Our correspondent Priya Sridhar talking to U.S. investigative journalist Wayne Madsen live from Washington. As Priya says, more from her a little later in Washington. Thank you.
How did the Department of Homeland Security get into the medical business? You know, it just is totally out of control on what they think we should do.
Also in Massachusetts, the legislature is acting rapidly on a bill updating what the state can do at a public health emergency. That bill has languished on Beacon Hill for some time, but with the flu outbreak, it's now racing through the legislature. NECN's Josh Brugadier is at the State House in Boston tonight. Josh?
RD, the state Senate passed this bill, Bill 2028 today. They did so unanimously, and it gives the governor and the health commissioner the power to act in the public's interest in case in any kind of medical emergency. Timing sped up a hearing and ultimately unanimous Senate approval of the Pandemic and Disaster Preparation and Response Bill in Massachusetts. The bill gives the public health commissioner the discretion to respond to an outbreak like the kind going on in Mexico, to close or evacuate buildings, enter private property, isolate or quarantine people, and to get and distribute meds and vaccines. A registry of Massachusetts volunteers would be created and would be activated in case of emergency. Plus, the commissioner could request personnel from other states. The bill also protects healthcare workers from liability. Concerns about the spread of swine flu meant lawmakers, such as Worcester County Democrat Richard Moore, didn't want to take any chances.
It's too bad that we have to have something like that pending to get us to finally act, but this was actually on the calendar before that became a news story. So it's not that it's totally that, but it does give us another reason why it's a good idea to have this on the books.
The big question is, does a bigger government always solve these problems? They usually make things much worse. So all I'm asking people to do is step back and think for a minute rather than rushing and panicking and taking advantage of opportunities like this. This is what happens, whether they're economic problems or medical problems. The people who love big government take advantage of this. And in the Department of Homeland Security, she's really not acting outside the prerogatives of that department. And one of the reasons I voted against it, it's an open-door invitation to deal with medical problems. And, of course, the way I see medical care in this country is deteriorating and the costs are skyrocketing, mainly because we have had central economic planning in medicine now for 30-some years. It hasn't worked very well, so now we're about to embark on socialized medicine. But I just don't think that we need the government in this manner dealing with this problem in a hysterical manner. We ought to just sit back and think about it for a minute, and maybe we'll come to our senses. But certainly it isn't a responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security, even though technically they might have the authority. That, to me, is not something that should be turned over to that department. That is the medical care of this country.
Josh, any penalty if you don't follow the emergency declaration rules?
It can actually get to be a pretty severe penalty, because for each day someone didn't follow a rule, for example, if somebody was asked to be quarantined and they decided not to follow that, it could be a fine of up to $1,000 per day they didn't follow, and also up to 30 days in prison.
Josh Brugadier on Beacon Hill tonight.
Man, the first time, if this were to happen, and the first time some cop goes in and gives some kid a shot, it's going to hit the fan.
Yes, it will, and the state of Massachusetts will be sorry it enacted this, because people will revolt against it.
All right, Judge Andrew Napolitano, thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
It's their conclusion, these scientists who they've spoken to, that this is a very unusual form of flu because it looks like it is a product of some gene splicing. The flu contains elements of bird flu, 2 forms of human flu, and various forms of swine flu. To them, it doesn't look like this is naturally occurring. The other thing is the target for this flu, as opposed to other flus, it's not the very young and the very old. It's people between the ages of 20 and 45. And the other thing is people are not contracting this from pigs. The National Pork Council here in America says pigs are not being affected. This is human-to-human contact. So people who either eat pork or are exposed to pigs are not getting this flu.
Dr. Emanuel wrote last October 12th that a crisis, war, and financial collapse would get the frightened public to accept the program.
It's the vaccine that can't come soon enough.
Now, from Reuters, I can't make this stuff up. The headline, "Container of swine virus explodes on Swiss train." Get this, it was a sample pack in dry ice. It exploded on the train and reportedly injured 1 person, but yet poses no risk to humans. The technician was transporting samples that were packed in dry ice on this train. No worry, didn't hurt anybody, it's all good. It's a different strain than the Mexican swine flu virus, the kind that doesn't transfer to humans or anything. The article goes on to state that after consulting virus specialists that confirm no risk exists, police decided to stop the train. Let me get this straight. This strain doesn't transfer to humans, yet this testing for the samples that he was carrying was to create a human flu test? Are you buying this story? Now, if this sample is not transferable to humans, poses no health threat to humans, why are they stopping the train? Again, if it's not transferable to humans, then why are they using it in their experiment to develop human testing? And why the hell are they running around carrying samples of flu virus on a public train? Have these people never heard of rental car or private transport or trucks?
They don't call them viruses anymore. They call them, quote, mock-up files. They're laboratory recombinants, genetically modified, mutated, hybridized, new laboratory creations that they don't even want to alert or alarm the public, so they have new names, new terminology.
Some New York hospital workers are fighting back.
It's very disconcerting to me.
Refusing to take the seasonal flu or the H1N1 vaccine mandated by the New York State Health Department for healthcare workers statewide.
It reminds me of the 1976 swine flu pandemic that was out. They did that. They created such a panic that people rushed to get these vaccines, and over 4,000 people became disabled in one way or another from those vaccines.
Getting the shot is not a 100% guarantee that you won't get the flu.
Even if long-term problems are unlikely. These workers say they'll be protesting at the state capitol on Tuesday as they're left with the choice, keep their jobs and get the shots, or be out of work just before Christmas.
And from Natural News, swine flu smoking gun. CDC was combining flu viruses in 2004. The article talks about the swine flu virus, and I'll read a portion of the article. Quote, last week, when it was called out to be infectious, health officials noted it was a strain of flu never before seen. That, in fact, it's incorrect to label it a swine flu, because analysis shows that, bottom line, the new flu virus contains DNA from avian, swine viruses, including elements from European and Asian viruses, and human viruses. So, did this curious mixture just develop naturally out of the blue? The answer, in my humble opinion, is no. But let's look at the facts first, okay? Fact number 1. You have troublesome details that the virus has come from multiple continents. Fact number 2. There's the fact that the true swine flu is only really transmittable to humans if the flu is spreading human to human. Most likely because it contains DNA from human flu. Ask yourself, could someone have mixed these viruses together? Is it possible? Well, absolutely it's possible. Was this virus mixing being done artificially in the lab, or had it already been done? Yes. Who is blending potential viruses in the labs? Well, all you have to do is look at the Reuters story. But wait, it gets worse. Fact number 3. There's evidence that the U.S. government has been working on concocting new virus blends. University of Minnesota Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy, CIDRAP, along with the Canadian newspaper Canadian Press, revealed back in 2004 that the CDC was launching experiments designed to mix the H5N1 avian virus and human flu viruses. Quote, now, rather than waiting to see if nature spawns such a hybrid, U.S. scientists are planning to try to breed one themselves in the name of preparedness. The goal was to find out how likely it was such a reassortant virus would emerge and just how dangerous it might be. Of course, it's logical to wonder if they also worked with the addition of a swine flu virus too. CDC officials confirmed the government had plans for the research. Now this is in 2004. The article asks, so the question is, did it escape from a lab, or was it deliberately released as some kind of test? When these kinds of questions are asked, the knee-jerk reaction of the mainstream media is to giggle and talk about conspiracy theories and to joke about wearing tinfoil hats. But here's the potential smoking gun. The facts suggest a potential source of the pandemic could be CDC labs. And at the very least, this possibility deserves thoughtful examination and research.
Practice of censoring science, of suppressing science, with simple changes in the vaccine schedule, such as delaying vaccines, getting out the metals such as aluminum and mercury, separating the shots, that they can reduce the amount of adverse events. This is the mandate of Congress in 1986, when Congress passed a law with a mandate for safer childhood vaccines. This has never been carried out because the government officials are simply afraid of the results. At this point, it's gone beyond regulatory misconduct, I think, to criminal negligence, because the government, it is incumbent on the government to release this information, to fund these kind of studies on an ongoing basis, so that we will have the information we can to change the schedule and to give parents the proper informed consent.
The U.S. military is making plans for a major outbreak of swine flu. Troops will be used to help civilian authorities, but there are also preparations being made to protect military forces from catching and spreading the disease within their ranks. Marianne Silver is live in Atlanta now. And Marianne, why is the military so concerned, and what led to this type of action to try and stop the spread?
Hi, Kelly. The military has confirmed over 2,300 cases of swine flu among active duty troops. And if you add to that some of the family members of active duty troops, it's over 3,800. So they're very concerned about it spreading. You know, a lot of military personnel work in close contact with each other, often, working in the same office and even bunking together. So just like what we've seen over the summer with those kids in summer camps, the virus spreading quickly, they're worried about the same thing happening to the military. And they want to get a handle on it because the military has offered to be there to provide testing for H1N1 to the public and also to distribute vaccines once they've been developed. I mean, they've offered their resources, so they want to be ready just in case something happens.
Yeah, and to some it may sound unusual, but it really isn't. You're taking all those kinds of precautions to make sure it doesn't spread. But like military troops, Marianne, young people, they seem to be at a greater risk for swine flu, with kids going back to school now in the fall. What are health officials saying about that scenario?
Well, Kelly, that is a big concern. CDC officials announced earlier this week that they are worried that we're going to see a huge increase in the number of cases, even more so than what we saw in the spring when everything started, because kids are going to be going back to school. They identified hundreds of cases in kids that attended summer camps over the summer. That's got them worried because the kids, of course, in classrooms are going to be in close contact with each other, and they're racing right now to get a vaccine available. They're going to have 40 million doses, they hope, by September, and another 120 million by mid-October, and they're hoping that that's going to hopefully help it, keep it from spreading if they can get some people vaccinated.
Absolutely, and you can be sure that a lot of parents out there are indeed very concerned about this one. Marianne Silver, live in Atlanta. Thank you, Marianne. Good to see you.
Hello, welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Cheryl Atkinson. If you've been diagnosed with probable or presumed 2009 H1N1 or swine flu in recent months, you may be surprised to know this. The odds are you didn't have H1N1 flu. In fact, you probably didn't have flu at all. That's according to state-by-state test results obtained in our 3-month-long CBS News investigation. In short, only a small fraction of cases that doctors flagged as most likely to be swine flu actually tested positive for swine flu at state labs. The vast majority of the cases were negative.
The president now declaring the H1N1 outbreak a national emergency. The White House says the president signed this proclamation last night. It will allow medical officials to bypass certain federal requirements. Some officials describe this move as being similar to a declaration ahead of a hurricane making landfall, but certainly a heads up on the White House's front on this. For more on the president's H1N1 emergency declaration, we're going to MSNBC's Mike Vaquera live at the White House. So can you put this in perspective for us? We hear these declarations before a hurricane makes landfall. Right. They're national emergencies. It waives certain federal requirements. How does this work in a health situation like this?
Well, it's relatively rare for this to be declared in a health situation. We know this much because last April, when the H1N1 virus first came to the fore of public consciousness, a similar step happened. Federal officials were quick to point out that there's no reason for this to make anybody panic. This is simply something that we're doing in terms of preparation. A lot of it has to do with logistics. Of course, it all happens in the context of a slow delivery of the H1N1 virus. Expectations were raised high. Everybody thought there would be more doses. doses. You've been talking about it all morning, Alex, and now they're talking about November. The government thus far has blamed that on the manufacturers. Let me read you a little bit from the proclamation here that President Obama signed last night, incidentally. It was just made public this morning. The president says, as a nation, we've prepared at all levels of government. Then he goes on, nevertheless, the 2009 H1N1 pandemic continues to evolve. The rates of illness continue to rise rapidly within many communities across the nation, and the potential exists for the pandemic to overburden healthcare resources in some localities. Thus, in recognition of the continuing progression of the pandemic and in further preparation as a nation, we're taking additional steps to facilitate our response. And he goes on later to reiterate that this illness may overburden healthcare resources. We've already seen lines. A lot of that has to do with the shortage and the shortfall of the vaccine, which they again, they had expected to see more of at this point in the process.
Right, okay, and of course the White House has no control at this point over the development of that vaccine. That is something that scientists and medical officials certainly do, and apparently for many that can't get out there fast enough. Okay, Mike Vaquero, thank you very much for the update on the breaking news from the White House. And for the latest on the government's response to the H1N1 outbreak, you can all log on to flu.gov.
They wouldn't answer Freedom of Information requests that we filed. They wouldn't answer questions that we posed to them. And we approached Dr. Frieden, who heads CDC, at an unrelated news conference to confront him about this lack of information. Here's that tape.
I'm Dr. Frieden. I'm Fernando Suarez with CBS News. I work with Cheryl Atkinson from our investigative department. This is on a separate issue. For weeks, we've been trying to get information from your office on the state-by-state breakdown of the H1N1 virus, and your office has been obstructing the release of that information. Can you assure us that you would personally look into this so that we can get that public information released today?
We will certainly look into it. We do work in partnership with states and coordinate with them on release of data that is data reported to CDC by state government. So it's a question of coordinating with the states on release of information. I'd like to see if there are other questions perhaps on the...
One last question. The information is available to the CDC right now. What can we do to get that information released to us today? Your office has stopped communicating with us about this issue, so we had to come down here to ask you personally to get involved.
I am aware of the issue. We are discussing with states because some of the states have provided to us preliminary or incomplete data, and we need to make sure that any data we release to the public is accurate and that the entities that have reported are comfortable that that data actually represents what they intended to report. So once we are comfortable in that, we will be happy to release it to you. I do not know whether that will be today or not. Are there other questions about the prevention, communities putting prevention to work?
Now, while we waited to get data from CDC, which we eventually did, but in the meantime, we contacted all 50 states directly. I just want to give you a couple of samples of what we found. In California, they took 13,000 specimens, and of those, 296 were swine flu, 12% were other flu, 86% were negative for flu altogether. And in Florida, they had 8,000 specimens, more than that actually. 17% proved to be, upon further testing, H1N1. 83% were negative. In Alaska, 1% was swine flu. And in Georgia, 2.4% was swine flu. The rest were negative for swine flu. We want to make sure that people understand we're not trying to downplay the seriousness of swine flu, which it can be very serious, but there's a risk of overreacting.
Just as it sounds, this is an influenza virus that is commonly seen in pigs. However, in rare occurrences, the virus does cause infections in humans. Swine influenza infections typically look clinically much like seasonal influenza, having symptoms such as fever, cough, sore throat, and muscle aches. Sometimes additional symptoms such as diarrhea or red eyes are also present. Typically, in swine influenza cases, there is evidence or there's information leading to that the individual had direct contact with pigs. This strain of swine influenza that's been cultured in the laboratory is something that's not been seen anywhere actually in the United States and the world. So this is actually a new strain of influenza that's been identified.
Really do your research and know that, number one, you have a right to make this decision. No government should ever force us. And please don't make this decision based out of fear.
This change to a higher phase of alert is a signal to governments, to ministries of health and other ministries, to the pharmaceutical industry and the business community that certain actions now should be undertaken with increased urgency.
I think as Americans, in order to stay alive, in order to preserve our way of life, people are willing to give up and to make sacrifices. Sure. But at the same time, there needs to be an orderly discussion of what the rights are of the American people when this happens.
Jeff, the primary thing that we say to anybody is let's cooperate and get this thing over with, and then we'll settle the differences once the crisis is over.
Such clergy response teams would walk a tightrope between the needs of the government versus the wishes of the public.
Unfortunately.
Plus a possibility of martial law, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Down the road, not going there.
That summer and fall, over 1.5 million Americans crossed the Atlantic for war. But some of those doughboys came from Kansas, and they brought something with them, a tiny, silent companion. Almost immediately, the Kansas sickness resurfaced in Europe. American soldiers got sick. English soldiers, French, German. As it spread, the microbe mutated, day by day, becoming more and more deadly. By the time the silent traveler came back to America, it had become a relentless killer.
Baxter International, based in Deerfield, Illinois, said Sunday that it is working with the World Health Organization on a potential vaccine. If Baxter rings a bell, it's because they were the company who accidentally created vaccine samples that were infected with the H5N1 bird flu strain that wound up distributed among a few European countries, including the Czech Republic, for lab testing. No lab workers were infected with the virus from the incident, and the vaccines were subsequently allegedly destroyed, but only after several ferrets were killed by the tainted vaccine.
There are two major news reports out of West Los Angeles that they literally surrounded him with an army. They hit his vehicle with a microwave EMP pulse machine to actually not only disable the ignition, but also knock out any electronics he had to transmit, because they tried to claim in the news article he threatened the President Obama, and he didn't do anything of the sort. What he did actually is he called in and said, I have new information, because I'm a biological scientist, that they're planning on releasing the Baxter vaccine made in the Ukraine that will be shipped to America, and it will, because it's one of the primary contracts, and it's going to contain lethal genes that will cause the death of millions. And he asked Truot on the air if he could get a contact for a state's attorney. He was on his way to the Israeli embassy at the time, which was near the FBI offices in Los Angeles, and the FBI surrounded him with literally an army with the active denial system, microwave tanks, robots. They tasered him and everything. I mean, they must have spent quite a bit of money and had deployed a tremendous number of people. You see the pictures there that are in the news articles. So this has the ring of truth. There's something going on here where we have whistleblowers coming out that are basically telling us, hey, they are going to release they're not just satisfied with the virus mutating and recombining, either becoming less or more lethal. They want to tweak it along to make sure that it's lethal enough they can declare martial law, which is what the government's pushing for. Because parallel with this, they want to have a bank holiday, they want to revalue the U.S. currency, and they want to switch over to the Amero note sometime in the next 6 to 12 months so that they can form the trade zone of North America.
Our understanding is that the Amero is no longer, that's actually defunct, and they're going with another kind of currency. They
might. Whatever the currency they're going to go with, they're going to do a tremendous devaluation of the U.S. dollar. What I have from my sources is that they're going to devalue it sometime in one of these waves. It could be this fall or winter, but they're getting ready to do that, and they want to have the cover, of course, of a plague occurring at the same time to quell the population, because there's going to be a lot of resistance.
This is not an isolated incident. A 4-year-old boy in Sweden named Kevin also fell ill after receiving the H1N1 swine flu shot. He began to have a seizure. Mother had to perform CPR on him in order to revive him. Now, this is 2 children that have gone into violent seizures and needed to be resuscitated with CPR. The doctor in the article also stated that this was not an isolated incident. He is not the first child that this has happened to. So they're doing a huge clinic in Tennessee this week. Keep your eyes open on Tennessee. Let's hope we don't see any more of these kinds of reactions in children. I'm sorry, folks, I think we're going to start seeing these crop up more and more. And the more people keep getting vaccinated, the more people are going to start showing these reactions. Common sense, don't you think?
Major concerns about a vaccine given to many teen girls this morning. Even though it could save them from cancer, parents say that the side effects of it may not be worth it. CNN Special Investigations Unit correspondent Abby Boudreau was here with more on all of this. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, John. So many people are so confused when it comes to the widely distributed HPV vaccine called Gardasil, which the Centers for Disease Control says helps prevent certain types of cervical cancer. But since Gardasil hit the market 2.5 years ago, there's been an alarming number of serious adverse reactions and even deaths that some say are linked to the vaccine. And as more girls come forward alleging the vaccine made them sick, the more confusion and mystery there is surrounding Gardasil and its manufacturer, Merck.
Taquaria Williams doesn't get to act like a kid anymore. She's just too tired.
It kind of hurts because I used to do a lot.
But Taquaria's mother says everything changed last December after her daughter received Gardasil, a vaccine that prevents 70% of cervical cancer.
She's never been sick. She's never been in a hospital. Nothing until the Gardasil shot.
2 months after getting the shot, Taquaria says she got a rash on her face and arms, leaving these scars. She had swelling all over, pain in her joints, and poor circulation in her fingertips. Her doctor told us she now suffers from an autoimmune disease and says it is possible the Gardasil triggered her illness, though she made it clear the cause cannot be proven. According to a federal tracking system called VAERS, there have been 9,749 adverse reactions following the vaccination, and 21 reported deaths since 2006.
I chose to get my daughter vaccinated.
But Merck, Gardasil's maker, points out these are anecdotal cases. In a statement, company officials say it, quote, does not necessarily mean that the vaccine caused or contributed to the event. An official with the Centers for Disease Control says VAERS does not provide enough information for researchers to prove whether Gardasil caused any of the reported side effects.
We want to have better data to reassure people.
But again, the patterns of the number of serious events looked at in theirs do not suggest any, increase in risk.
While the CDC believes Gardasil is safe, a conservative watchdog group called Judicial Watch, which has been studying Gardasil's safety, says parents' concerns about the vaccine are valid.
So without long-term studies and without a safety test, essentially the public is being used as a large-scale public health test.
What would have happened if you would have known that this research was out there?
I would have never got it. Never. I wouldn't have never had her get the shot.
The CDC tells us it's working on a comprehensive study right now that will determine whether or not there is a pattern that links Gardasil to some of these serious side effects. That study is expected to be released in October. In the meantime, John, both the CDC and Merck encourage women to get regular pap smears even if they've gotten the Gardasil shot. John?
Yeah, Abby, we have heard in the past about potential links between certain vaccines and autism, and there was one case that was decided by a court that found that the vaccine triggered an underlying condition. Could that be the sort of case here with this vaccine, that maybe if it didn't actually cause the disease, it triggered an underlying condition to manifest itself?
It's so hard to know the answer to that, and I think that's why the CDC is looking into this, and they soon will have their comprehensive study that's going to be out this October. In the young girl's case that we talked to this time, the doctor that we talked to over the phone said it very well could have triggered her autoimmune disease, but there's just no way to really prove that.
Wow. Troubling story. Abby Boudreau for us with that this morning. Abby, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Influenza viruses are notorious for their rapid mutation and unpredictable behavior.
For over a century, the booming science of medicine had gone from one triumph to another. Researchers had developed vaccines for many diseases: smallpox, anthrax, rabies, diphtheria, meningitis.
With the great advances in microbiology, we were eliminating mysteries, okay? The mystery of what causes this disease, the mystery of what causes this disease. The optimism of being able to visualize something, all we have to do is just look under the microscope and we'll see the organism and then take an action and see that something die off or be controlled. That leads to the thought of invincibility.
This is a little song that John Porritt likes to sing in the shower. Mercury is poisonous except when it's injected. If you don't take your shots, you're gonna get infected. Vaccines are good for you, the sun is gonna kill you. You breathe too much, you eat too much, so what are we gonna do? The state should raise your children, and you need Big Brother to keep us all in line and take care of your mother. So take your microchip and button up your lip. You breathe too much, you eat too much, the planet's gonna flip.
Vaccines are required if you're headed to war, but Target 5 discovered that a frightening number of U.S. servicemen and women are having severe reactions, including a young Marine from Claremont County.
It's difficult right now.
At a time when young men and women are dying on the battlefield.
We live in a very volatile time in the military.
There is an enemy here at home.
And no one wants to look bad.
It's not a shot from a gun.
This is the worst cover-up in the history of the military.
But a shot from a syringe that's leaving some U.S. servicemen and women on the brink of death.
When the issue, I believe, of the use of the vaccine comes out, I believe that it'll make the Walter Reed scandal pale in comparison.
It's an exhausting 3-day-a-week routine for 20-year-old Lance Corporal David Fay of Claremont County. His kidneys are failing, his military career is over, and he feels like his country has abandoned him.
I can't look at my old pictures. I really can't. I start looking at my old pictures and I start crying.
To understand the odyssey of David Fay requires going back in time. He was a boy who loved the ocean, but grew up amid the farm fields of Claremont County.
I never missed a day of school. I was never sick. I was never sick.
A passion for sports and a sense of patriotism prompted this Blanchester High School athlete to join the Marines on his 18th birthday.
And I looked at every branch, but I wanted the Marine Corps because the Marine Corps was the few of the proud.
From boot camp to combat training, it was the happiest time of his life.
It was great. I loved every minute of it.
But a case of friendly fire in the form of a syringe would forever change his life. On November 28th of 2005, David's unit was lined up for what he says was an undisclosed shot.
They asked us our name. We stood on these yellow footprints, and they gave us a shot. Then we got the rest of the day off. After that shot, I started swelling up. I gained 30 pounds of water. My eyes swelled up where I couldn't see. I started snoring. I developed a rash on my hand.
3 weeks later, Private Fay was back in Claremont County on his deathbed at Clinton Memorial Hospital. His kidneys failing, his body so swollen it left stretch marks.
I used to just pray to God, please, take him tonight.
As David appeared to be dying, Cindy Fay began poring over his military medical records in search of answers.
The shot was never listed in his records.
As the months passed by, David's uniform would hang in the closet, while his life would hang in the balance. Still unclear about the shot he was given on November 28th of 2005. The Department of Defense tells Target 5, all service members' vaccinations are documented in the individual's permanent medical record. But David Fay's military medical records revealed no shot on that day. Another Marine in David's unit tells Target 5 there's no shot listed in his medical records either, and goes on to say the people who administered the shot never told us what it was.
My son is a Marine, a PFC David Fay, and
in a desperate attempt to save her dying son, Cindy says she called the U.S. Marine Hospital at 29 Palms, California, to find out what kind of vaccine her son was given.
And she says, ma'am, that's confidential. I can't tell you what the shot was. And I'm like, well, my son's in ICU and he might not make it right now. I said, I really need to know. And she says, well, we can't tell you.
11 months later, David's medical records were mysteriously changed, with a handwritten notation indicating the mystery shot was a flu vaccine.
The case of David Fay, nothing was put on his record, and then suddenly flu vaccine appears on his record. Does that surprise you?
No. No, we have a lovely term for that. We call it CYA. That's unfortunately an SOP in the military.
David is one of a growing number of U.S. servicemen and women getting sick after receiving vaccines. And this highly praised Department of Defense medical officer is mortified. He doesn't want to be identified for fear of retribution.
Are there a lot of folks out there who've had severe reactions to these vaccines?
Thousands. It ranging on the severity from just joint aches and pains and arthritic symptoms to death.
The Department of Defense tells Target 5 it encourages healthcare workers and vaccine recipients to report adverse events. But the military never reported David Fay's reaction to the Centers for Disease Control and FDA.
I see the way propaganda and information war is waged against America's sons and daughters, and how patients are treated who claim to be ill from a vaccine. That's troubling. That should trouble America.
How are these young men and women treated when they claim to have had a reaction to the vaccine?
Like they're nuts, like it's all in their head.
And this medical officer believes young servicemen and women are being used as guinea pigs.
Do you believe that the Department of Defense is experimenting on these servicemen and women with these vaccinations?
I would hope to God not, but from what I've seen, I would have to say yes.
The Department of Defense maintains the vaccines are safe and effective. Those are hollow words to Lance Corporal David Fay.
I'm in bed every single minute of the day. I can't eat because I throw up. I have no energy. I've been laying in bed, bedridden for so long.
4 months after that interview, David has lost 60 pounds from dialysis and is determined to rebuild his body and his life. still waiting for a kidney transplant, still waiting for an answer from the U.S. military.
My biggest wish? Just to get up and be without pain. I mean, just to get up every day and just be happy again.
Even after everything David Fay has been through, he still longs to be a part of the U.S. Marines. David still considers himself part of the few and the proud, even though he feels the military has abandoned him. Dave Wagner, Target 5.
Abby Swank was a straight-A student and cheerleader. That's her near the center. But that was before she became very ill. One lab. Gardasil. Following the standard dose of 3 Gardasil vaccinations.
We're like, we're going to go get it because we felt like almost pressured by the commercials.
Gabby got sicker after each shot, progressing to seizures, strokes, and heart problems. It was her neurologist who suspected Gardasil was to blame.
I think that there are too many people having serious long-term side effects.
Last fall, the government concluded there's no link between Gardasil and serious adverse events like Gabby's, but a new analysis calls that finding into question. The National Vaccine Information Center, a private vaccine safety group, compared Gardasil adverse events to another vaccine, one also given to young people but for meningitis. Gardasil had triple the number of ER visits, 5,000. Reports of side effects were up to 30 times higher.
We would never have gotten the shot, and she'd be here to hug.
Emily Tarcell's daughter Chris died 3 weeks after her 3rd Gardasil shot, one of 29 fatalities reported in 2 years.
Now we know from this report that there are more reactions and deaths associated with Gardasil than with another vaccine given in the same age group. It's irresponsible not to take action.
Merck, the FDA, and CDC question the value of the new analysis, say they continue to review the data, Gardasil remains safe and effective, and its benefits outweigh the risks. Those who believe the vaccine hurt them aren't convinced. Gabby isn't cheering anymore and is too sick to even attend school.
I struggle with guilt a lot because I made the choice to get the shot for her.
Meantime, Merck has asked the FDA to approve Gardasil for boys who can pass on the cancer-causing virus to girls, meaning the number of people getting Gardasil may double. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
There are questions being asked about the vaccine known as Gardasil. About 8 million American girls have gotten the vaccine, which prevents cervical cancer. But is it safe? Here's Cheryl Atkinson.
The hope is that Gardasil will prove to be a lifesaver, preventing deadly cervical cancer. But today, Merck's HPV vaccine is dealing with a growing number of reports of serious side effects. Jamie Venice passed out and had a seizure after her Gardasil shot.
After my seizure, I remember I didn't want to go to bed because I thought that I wasn't going to be able to wake up.
She was lucky compared to Amanda Ratner. She came down with an illness so excruciating she had to take morphine. Her parents, both doctors, blame Gardasil.
She's gone from the position of being a competitive varsity lacrosse player in high school to somebody who's chronically ill.
Gardasil was approved in 2006 for girls as young as age 9. The conservative-funded public interest group Judicial Watch has obtained more than 8,000 adverse events reports under Freedom of Information law. The reports reveal everything from massive wart outbreaks to seizures and paralysis. Of 18 deaths, nearly a quarter cited blood clots. Jessica Vega got the shot at school when she was 13. Soon after, she was paralyzed. It took a year of braces and treatment to get her on her feet. Brittany Bell was 12. She collapsed with brain inflammation and paralysis. 14-year-old Jenny developed life-threatening paralysis that's resistant to treatment. Merck and the CDC say Gardasil is safe and effective, and that they've not found a link to any deaths.
Which one was that? Now, let's see. That was aspartame.
Many doctors have serious health concerns about aspartame, and I'm a person who also has serious health concerns. Aspartame is classified as an excitotoxin, which means it is toxic to the nervous system. So that means your brain, your eyes, your spine. And aspartame is known to cause dizziness, seizures, migraine headaches. I mean, it is a chemical that does not belong in the food supply, and if we had an honest system of regulation, it would have been banned long ago.
Robert, welcome to To Your Health.
Nice to be here.
Mother says milk is good. What is this? Milk is no good.
Let me tell you about milk. The #1 protein in milk is casein, C-A-S-E-I-N. That's 80% of the protein in milk. That's the same glue they use to put a label on a bottle of beer. That's the same glue they use to hold your wooden furniture together.
So we're drinking glue.
You're drinking glue, and you create so much mucus. This much casein, this much mucus.
Okay, we're getting technical. You're using a lot of chemicals.
Yeah.
What qualifies you to talk about these?
Well, the greatest controversy in the history of the Food and Drug Administration was the genetic engineering of milk. I'm the only person in America to be invited to meet with a group of top scientists at FDA. I used to do research, $50 word, psychoneuroendocrinology, the study of brain and behavior, how hormones affect behavior. And I uncovered secrets. I opened up a Pandora's box of secrets that the dairy industry wishes had never been opened.
If milk is so bad, then how come everybody else is so wrong and so brainwashed that it's good for you?
Well, they get Calcium Ripken to pose for his milk mustache. Spike Lee, you got 500,000 kids in the New York area that have asthma. They're drinking this glue every day. Spike Lee, 95% of African Americans are lactose intolerant. How could he wear this milk mustache? This is a message. Money is spent by the dairy industry. If you're a doctor, you call their toll-free number, 800-Y-MILK. They'll send you $200 worth of free information.
Don't ever question why. Don't even bother to try. It's all just one big lie. Whoopee, you're all gonna die.
We're developing a society because of all of these different toxins known to affect brain function. We're seeing a society that not only has a lot more people of lower IQ, but a lot fewer people of higher IQ. In other words, a dumbing down, a chemical dumbing down of society. So everyone's sort of mediocre. That leaves them dependent on government because they can't excel. We have these people of lower IQ who are totally dependent. Then we have this mass of people who are going to believe anything they're told because they can't really think clearly. And very few people of very high IQ who have good cognitive function who can figure this all out. And that's what they want. So, you know, you can kind of piece it together as to why they are so insistent in spending so many hundreds of millions of dollars of propaganda money to dumb down society.
The Supreme Court of the United States ruled today that living organisms produced in the laboratory may be patented. This decision to extend
the U.S. Supreme Court had to decide was whether one man or one company should be able to control new forms of life.
We allow a company or college to exclusively own a species. What does that say about our reverence for life?
Aspartame, the artificial sweetener found in almost every low-sugar or sugar-free product on the market.
First of all, aspartame is made up of three things: methanol, which of course is what produces blindness, aspartic acid, and phenylalanine. These are all poisons. Aspartic acid, of course, produces brain lesions. This was known back in the early 1970s. Methanol produces blindness. Phenylalanine is what you see in the brain, and in high dosage it produces trauma.
Yet despite all of these harmful effects, Donald Rumsfeld pushed it out into the stores in over 5,000 products when he was CEO of Searly, the company that manufactured aspartame.
Let me back up and tell you that I've been watching Codex come toward us for about the last decade. I've been watching Codex accelerate, and I've been watching it expand, and I've been getting more and more troubled.
On to the news. Believe it or not, there's a bill waiting to be passed in the House under the name of H.R. 875 that will make it illegal to grow organic food, grow some tomatoes, or have a chicken coop. Trouble is, the legislation is so broad in its wording that somebody with a little backyard garden could receive a $25,000 fine and have their property seized, even if only they consume what they grow.
Bill H.R. 875 will literally put all independent farmers and mom-and-pop
food producers out of business due to the huge amounts of money it will take to conform to factory farming methods. And if people continue to farm without chemical pesticides and toxic fertilizers, they will be subject to a variety of harassment from a completely new agency that has never before existed. That's right, just what we need. A whole new government agency is being created just to police your backyard food. It's for your own protection, though, of course.
Section 103 of the bill also allows the appointing of so-called officials from factory farming corporations and even allows them to write the legislation, including the legal right to inspect your backyard. For those that remember history, Russia's Joseph Stalin nationalized farming methods that enabled his administration to gain control over the country's food supply, ultimately using food to control the people. If you'd like to learn more, just Google H.R. 875 and be sure to contact your representative and let them know how you despise this bill.
And basically none of the crops will grow. Most of the people will have died, and the rest of us will be cannibals. Civilization will have broken down. What the few people who are left will be living in a failed state like Somalia or Sudan, and living conditions will be intolerable. The droughts will be so bad there'll be no more corn growing.
Your government loves you, they want you to be happy. Enjoy your stay at FEMA, even if it's crappy. You gotta save nature by moving to the city. You breathe too much, you eat too much, it's really such a pity.
After the Second World War, the Nuremberg tribunals were held in which people who had committed crimes against humanity were judged by the world community in a court run by the United States and Britain, and they were sentenced to terms in prison if they were found guilty of crimes against humanity. One of the people found guilty of crimes against humanity was the president of a huge industrial megalith called IG Farben. IG Farben produced the gas used in the gas chambers, Cyclone B. They produced the steel for the death camps and the railroad lines. They produced the munitions, they produced chemicals, they produced all kinds of stuff. They produced pharmaceuticals. Big pharmaceutical company. So the president of IG Farben was convicted of crimes against humanity. Now, he's a sort of artistic fellow and creative. He was the one who was responsible for the slogan that people saw as they entered Auschwitz, usually for the last time. Arbeit macht frei. Work brings freedom. Creative sort of fellow. So he was sitting in jail and he said, well, that didn't work. What else can we do? I've got it. Food. He who controls food controls the world. So when he got out of jail, he went to his UN buddies and he said, have I got an idea for you? If we take over food worldwide, we have power worldwide. And his UN buddies said, cool idea. And so they created a trade commission. That's a very important pair of words, a trade commission called the Codex Alimentarius Commission. It is not a public health commission. It is not a consumer protection commission. It is a trade commission. Trade is about what? Money. Business. Trade is about profit. Well, they said in 1962, we're going to work toward total global implementation of Codex Alimentarius on December 31st, 2009.
We've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there were
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff. But if there were less people, they'd be using less stuff.
And they set up a bunch of committees on fish and fishery, fats and oil, fruits and vegetables, ground nuts, nutrition and foods for special dietary uses, and so on. There are currently about 27 Codex Committee. There are regional organizations. There are task forces and so on. So it's a huge bureaucratic monstrosity. It's immense. Codex has promulgated well over 4,000 guidelines, standards, and regulations. on everything, everything which can legally be put into your mouth, with the exception of pharmaceuticals. They are not part of Codex. Important. Now, Codex standards have no legal weight whatsoever. Zero. So who cares about them? They're just standards. So we're talking about an industry-dominated, regulation-setting organization. But if it has no legal standing, who cares, right? Here's the history of Codex Alimentarius before 1962. The Austro-Hungarian Empire said, we need rules by which the courts can rule on cases involving food. So we'll have regulations and rules that the courts will enforce. That's how they get their weight. That was called the Codex Alimentarius, and it was put into place around 1893 and lasted until the end of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the First World War. So the idea was there in the Germanic tradition. We need rules, lots of rules, lots and lots of rules. We need a lot of rules. Let's have rules for everything to do with food. So it was sort of a natural extension for the German industrialists to say, we'll go back to the good old days of Codex Alimentarius, back when we had them in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Cool. So they started promulgating their rules and regulations, and they were voluntary. They were sort of guidelines. Now, Codex Alimentarius Commission is administered by the World Health Organization, WHO, and the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. They fund Codex and they run it at the request of the UN. So they're mommy and daddy to Codex Alimentarius. And that's very interesting because they're supposed to be about health and food worldwide. Some conflicts of interest that we'll talk about. So Codex started promulgating regulations and rules, and the way that's done is that the committees work up a rule, a standard, a guideline, a regulation, and then they get it to what's called Step 8, which is the final step in their administrative process, and then it's presented to the Codex Alimentarius Commission for ratification, like the Vitamin and Mineral Guideline was presented to the Codex Alimentarius Commission on July 4th this past summer. It was ratified, it was approved by consensus, and it is now, despite the propaganda that you're going to hear, if you ever hear about it in the media, it is now mandatory upon any member country of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. Well, what in the world do they have to do with it? And the answer is everything. The World Trade Organization, you see, accepted Codex when the World Trade Organization was formed in 1994. Okay? They said, well, how are we going to decide trade disputes around food if we don't have a set of rules? I know. We'll accept the Codex Alimentarius rules. And all the members of the WTO worldwide will, get ready for an Orwellian term, harmonize with our standards, with the Codex standards. Harmonize. I suggest you capitalize the first 4 letters in your mind. So everybody's supposed to harmonize with Codex. And when they harmonize with Codex, then if they get pulled into the World Trade Organization dispute resolution process, they have a chance of winning. Because, here's the kicker. You ready for this one? If 2 countries go into the World Trade Organization dispute resolution process, and one of them is Codex compliant, and one of them is not Codex compliant, the one that is Codex compliant automatically wins regardless of the merit of the case. People are using Codex compliance as a weapon in a much bigger economic battle. So, every country in the world is racing to do what? To become Codex compliant. So, in the United States, the situation is, okay, how do we become Codex compliant when we have laws that protect us? And you have to remember that Codex does not serve consumer well-being, does not serve health. It serves what I call the 5 bigs. Big Pharma, Big Chema, Big Biotechna, Big Agribiz, and Big Medica. Little you and little me are not served by Codex in the least.
66% of United States residents' public water is fluoridated. It is known to have tremendous effects on bone cancer, joint problems, bone weakness, lowered estrogen and testosterone levels, and dental fluorosis, which is yellowing of the teeth and pitting in the enamel. Wouldn't it make more sense to enhance public water with vitamins which are meant to be ingested to promote overall health, rather than putting such a toxic chemical in our water with a bogus explanation that it will improve our dental health? We now know that fluoride causes more dental problems than it solves. Something doesn't seem right about this. Do you honestly believe that these companies care deeply enough for the people to spend large amounts of their own money to fluoridate public water when the people already purchase their own toothpaste? But there's a difference between toothpaste and drinking water. We don't ingest toothpaste. If you go to any hardware store and look at any rat poison product, you will only find one ingredient: sodium fluoride. It is the most toxic ionic molecule outside of potassium dichromate. Now Dannon, along with other companies, have begun fluoridating bottled water. It is becoming increasingly difficult to get away from. And the fact that fluoride is also used in many prescription antidepressants shows that it eliminates aggression and motivation in people.
Fluoride, to my knowledge as a physician, has absolutely no biological benefit whatsoever.
But one of the significant things is that the Russians carried out all sorts of experiments on the people living in the Gulag. One of them, of course, was to fluoridate the water. Why? You fluoridate the water, why people are not as aggressive as they ordinarily would be. In fact, what is the active ingredient in Prozac that is so widely distributed in America today? Why, it's a fluoride compound.
And now we are finding that public water nationwide is showing up with arsenic, lead, cadmium, and thermonium, which is a radioactive form of lead. Cancer, lowered sex drive, birth defects, sedation, and brain defects. Does this not sound like a wonder drug for anyone aiming to control a population?
It's quite astonishing, Paul, the degree to which environmentalists have not been educated about fluoride. You know, people have an unconscious trust in their doctor or their dentist, and if you can persuade doctors and dentists that fluoride is safe and good, then you're able to reach the rest of the nation. People believe their doctors and dentists, and that was a way of promoting fluoride for Bernays. Fluoride was killing their cattle, destroying their crops. Fluoride given to rats had produced bone cancer and liver cancer, and that those results had been doctored to make it look as though fluoride hadn't caused as much cancer.
The pattern that we saw, it typically is what we see with other neurotoxic agents that are well known to cause a hypoactivity or a memory problem or an IQ problem. When I first presented the results of these studies, one of the individuals sitting and listening to the results, he says, "Do you have any idea what you're saying?" And he says, "You're telling us that we're reducing the IQ of children." And basically I said, yes.
Well, do you know what's in your drinking water? A shocking Associated Press investigation found various pharmaceuticals in the drinking supplies of at least 41 million Americans. Tainted water was found from New Jersey to California. NBC's Tom Costello is following the story from Washington. Tom, I've been dying to ask somebody some questions about this story. First of all, what kinds of drugs are we talking about, and How dangerous is this?
Pretty wide range. Here's the drinking water in Washington, D.C. They found 6 pharmaceuticals in our drinking water here. They include ibuprofen, caffeine, monosin, and about 3 or 4 others. In Philadelphia, they had 56 pharmaceuticals or byproducts. They range everything from epilepsy medication to mental health medicines to pharmaceuticals that really run the gamut. Here's the bottom line from the Associated Press on the study they did. It was, as you mentioned, a 5-month investigation involving the AP investigative team. 50 major cities in 50 states were looked at, and drugs were found in the water of 24 major cities. We're talking 41 million Americans here who drink that water. So what's in the water? Everything from acetaminophen and ibuprofen to mood stabilizers, antibiotics, angina, heart, as well as cholesterol drugs, and even sex hormones. The trouble here, Meek, is that the federal government does not test specifically for pharmaceuticals in the water. And in fact, there is no way to scrub water that is in a treatment plant for pharmaceuticals. I did a story about 4 years ago in which we found a river in Colorado, and now we know there are many rivers, in which the fish were turning from male to female. And the reason was because there was too much estrogen in the water. The natural female hormone was literally turning male fish into female fish, and the thinking was that this is a canary in a coal mine. So now the question is, what's the impact on humans?
Yep, that's the next one. Tom Costello on this story from Washington. Thank you very much.
British and American scientists say they've established a possible link between a chemical used to make plastic bottles and cases of heart disease and diabetes. They believe the chemical can disrupt natural hormones in the body.
It's found in drink bottles, food containers, disposable cutlery and our bodies. The chemical is called bisphenol A, or BPA, and it's widely used in plastic products. Now scientists have linked it to heart disease and diabetes. Researchers at the University of Exeter found adults with the highest levels of BPA in their bodies were more than twice as likely to suffer from one of the diseases than those with the lowest levels of the chemical. Their livers also showed signs of being under stress.
Bisphenol A acts like a hormone, or it disrupts the actions of hormones, particularly estrogen, and that might be having some effect on insulin resistance and on the way that fat is distributed in the body.
Around 3 million tons of bisphenol A are produced each year. It can leach out of plastic packaging, contaminating food or drink. It's yet another worry for consumers. Bisphenol A is almost impossible to avoid. It's even found in the plastic lining of canned drinks. But don't panic yet, says this scientist.
Before we jump to the conclusion that it's bisphenol A that's causing these problems, we should consider what is a more likely but ordinary explanation, and that is that the association is there because they're drinking more canned beverages, which have lots of sugar, and which may cause the disorders.
It would be quite handy to blame plastic chemicals in the bottle for our epidemic of heart disease in the Western world. The truth is, that's not what this study shows. Far more research is needed before we give up on the old lifestyle advice on diet and exercise.
Up next, got milk? You may wish you didn't after tonight's Hard Target investigation exposes what's really in some of it.
Milk is loaded with powerful growth hormones. Hormones that should never be in the human body.
Imagine a cow on crack cocaine. That's how author Robert Cohen describes something shot into millions of cows on American farms.
We genetically engineer a hormone that produces more milk when we didn't need more milk.
While Cohen admits calcium is good for you, he says leafy green vegetables have lots more calcium than milk.
If you look at nature's perfect food, human breast milk, there are 33 milligrams of calcium per 100-gram portion. Potato chips have 40, beans have 50, chickpeas 150, amaranth, a grain, has 267.
Cohen says dairy products are a poor source of calcium for another reason.
Every scientist in the world knows that protein inhibits calcium absorption, and milk is liquid meat. It's protein.
What is in milk that you say is poisonous, and why would the government be covering this up?
Well, what's in milk? You're drinking body fluids from other animals. 60% of the cows in America have leukemia virus. 80% have something called paratuberculosis. You don't want to eat something with that name, paratuberculosis. You've got irritable bowel syndrome in America. That's what it causes. 4 million American women have irritable bowel syndrome. You're talking about if your doctor said, I want you to eat today 53 slices of bacon because that cholesterol is good for you, You're eating from your dairy products the same cholesterol contained in 19,000 slices of bacon this year. By age 52, 1 million slices of bacon's worth of cholesterol. You don't want that in your body.
Of real concern, though, you talk about the bovine growth hormone.
Hormone is the big word here. There are 4,000 mammals. There are 500,000 different hormones. Only one hormone, this is the big secret the dairy industry doesn't want you to know, only one hormone is identical in all of nature between two animals. It's human and cow. It's the most powerful growth hormone in our body. Drink a 12-ounce glass of milk. Double the only hormone that makes breast cancer grow once you get it.
I went to the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Chicago, and I was so into becoming a real doctor, and real doctors do real doctor things. They deliver babies, they fix broken arms, they sew up lacerations. That's what real doctors do. And diet was boring stuff. And nutrition, yeah, you send them down to the dietitian, and they figure out a 2,000-calorie diet, and don't bother me. And that's how I practiced medicine for the first 8 or 10 years of my career. Well, I have soon, or late, come to realize how important what we eat really is in the creation and prevention of so many of the diseases that we see today. And I'll tell you how I came to those realizations. The two top lines, the lavender line and the yellow line, are the amount of plant-based foods that are consumed in the United States and in Canada as well. And this is back in 1909. You can see we were eating a lot of grain products. We were eating almost 300 pounds of wheat and barley and other grain products, and almost 200 pounds of potatoes a year. Look what happened in the intervening 85 years. Our consumption of wheat and grain products have fallen to half of their 1909 level, and our potato consumption has fallen to half of their 1909 level. Look what happened to the amount of flesh foods that we are eating. The amount of milk we consume has more than doubled. Our beef consumption's gone up by 50%, and our chicken consumption's gone up by 280%. We are eating a tremendous amount of animal flesh, and we have essentially exchanged a plant-based diet for a meat-based diet. And the results have been just disastrous for both our health and the environment.
I see the human situation I liken to a baseball game. It's in the 7th inning, and we're down by 1 run. So we're backs to the wall. Right. What we have to do, though, in the next 2 innings, the game's not over. It's still winnable. But what we've got to do is hold them right where they are with our best pitcher. Right. And we've got to get a couple runs on the board.
Get a man on base.
And then get him in.
Get him in.
And that ties it, and then another run to go ahead, and we win. That's where we are. We're in a tough situation, but we can play our way out of it if we do the right things. It's time for smart political leaders, no more dummies. We can't afford dumb leadership.
Now, cow's milk is a high-fat fluid exquisitely designed for turning a 65-pound calf into a 400-pound cow in a year. That is what cow's milk is for. Now, whole milk has a butterfat content of 3%. That's the cream that rises up to the top. And you drink a 3% solution of butterfat, you're going to turn your blood fatty, as will a 2 and 1% solution of butterfat. But at the dairy, the butterfat is skimmed off, and they concentrate it into huge vats, half the size of this room. And they concentrate the fat to 50, 60, 80, 90% fat. This stuff is so thick you can walk across it. Why do they do that? Well, they do that so you will buy it and eat it. The butterfat is mixed up with air until it hardens into chunks called butter. The butterfat is mixed with sugar and frozen and sold as ice cream. The butterfat is mixed up with cocoa powder and sugar and sold as milk chocolate. The butterfat is mixed up with bacteria and allowed to ferment until it turns into sour cream. A lower fat version is called yogurt. And the butterfat is mixed up with calf's stomach and bacteria and allowed to ferment for about 6 weeks till it hardens into chunks called cheese. These are all forms of butterfat. The folks at the dairy want you to buy the butterfat and eat it. And when you do, you turn your blood fatty. There's absolutely no reason to run butterfat through your bloodstream at any time, and I'm submitting to you that you'll be a lot healthier and happier if you do not. Cow's milk is for baby calves. You have no more need of cow's milk than you need giraffe milk or horse milk or rat milk.
Sustainable development has become the popularized expression for Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is the 1992 United Nations Rio Declaration on the Environment and Development.
It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
Agenda 21 defines itself as the comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems.
It also elevates nature above man. And it contains something called the precautionary principle, where basically you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
Sustainable development is the philosophy designed to bring human beings across the globe under the full control of a narrow human elite.
It's a 40-chapter document to basically control the world. It's based entirely on socialist control mechanisms.
Sustainable developers have designed a global movement coordinated through a global to local action plan to create world government in accordance with certain objectives. These objectives include an end to national sovereignty, the abolition of private property, the restructure of the family unit, and increasing limitations and restrictions on mobility and individual opportunity.
The green goal includes the listings of what's not sustainable. A couple of the examples include private property.
728 lists fossil fuels.
Golf courses and ski lodges are not.
Consumerism.
Irrigation is not sustainable.
Paved roads.
Commercial agriculture.
Herbicides, pesticides. Elsewhere, it lists farmlands, pastures, grazing of livestock.
And the family unit. The focus of sustainable development is the abolition of private property, societal undermining of the family, and abandonment of the constitutional protection of unalienable rights as described in the Declaration of Independence. You see, I sat on the Santa Cruz Agenda 21 committees. Now, this was a lot of crazy ideas. This is back in the mid-90s. Crazy ideas I heard. Mother Earth's surface wasn't to be scratched. Human beings were to be concentrated into human settlement zones. Educational systems were to focus on the environment as the central organizing principle. All aspects of life were covered. Well, I went to these committees at the request of some people who told me that I needed to understand what was going on, and I came back and I said, this is craziness. This is so silly. It has no chance of having any effect on our society. Well, I was wrong.
The United States government's support for Sustainable Development, Agenda 21, is very clear. In 1992, while the Rio Conference was going on, George Bush, then president, was there where he executed the Agenda 21 protocols on behalf of the United States and brought it back to Washington, D.C. Within a year, Bill Clinton, by executive order, no congressional review, established the President's Council for Sustainable Development. In Santa Cruz, we've got a 2-lane freeway system. We need 4, but what we're getting is hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money to take a dilapidated rail line that Southern Pacific wants to put in the hands of somebody else so that a commuter line can be built along the railroad track. That'll be followed by 14-story buildings where people will live and stack them and pack them units, where developers or so-called sustainable developers will build these high rises with federal dollars. In fact, Santa Cruz has received a $300 million federal grant to build the first 3,000 of these stack them and pack them units. The County Board of Supervisors has said, if you are a sustainable developer, you're immune from any construction defect liability. It's a partnership between selected developers building this new world order and the government using the American taxpayer dollars in order to do it. This is a map of the Wildlands Project. To explain the map, the red are areas that are to be off limits to human beings. No resource development, no human activity. If you live there, you won't. The yellow areas are the areas for major control of all human activity. If you live there, you won't. The black areas, the black dots, are the smart growth zones. That's where human beings are to be stacked and packed in small living units along rail tracks. The Smart Growth Program ultimately has jobs assigned and children cared for by the state.
The question has been asked many times how the people who are perpetrating these things expect to do this and make it last. And the answer to that is that you steal a generation of children and you indoctrinate them so that they accept these ideas and they become global citizens in the coming global village.
UNESCO came out and declared 2005 to 2015 the decade of education for sustainable development. But they go on to say that it will encompass the 40 chapters of Agenda 21. That is your federal national curriculum. The entire purpose of second grade social studies is to transfer loyalty from the family to the government and teach them about sustainable economic consumption. Students construct their own understandings of reality and realize that objective reality is not knowable. So why bother? The truth is, the truth which keeps men free is being suppressed in order to prop up the attitude training agenda. And it moves on. This is our new math called connected mathematics. Standard 3 tells us that students learn that mathematics is man-made, that it is arbitrary, and good solutions are arrived at by consensus. Most of us assume 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4. You're wrong. We might reach a new consensus. How well does it work? Well, they tell you in the teacher's guide in the back, it tells us that because the curriculum doesn't emphasize arithmetic computations done by hand, some students may not do as well on tests assessing computational skills. We believe such a trade-off in the favor of CMP is very much to the student's advantage in the world of work. Our children are mathematically illiterate on purpose. How do I know on purpose? Why isn't this just a basic bad idea? Because the Sustainable Development Plan tells us so. Generally, more highly educated people who have higher incomes consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability. Charlotte Iserby, I owe you an apology. I did not believe for the longest time it was a deliberate dumbing down. I thought the dumbing down was a natural consequence of a bad idea. Folks, it's deliberate. It's deliberate.
The sustainable globalist goal is the orchestration of a planned fall of American principles, values, and lifestyles. The effect on the average American will be devastating. With modernizing technology, the ordinary person will live without independence, privacy, or substantive rights.
We're barely keeping our heads above water, trying to just help the community to be able to have good, healthy, organic food. And especially with everyone telling us that there's nowhere really for them to get it, or there's affordable for people. I mean, that was, I think, the hardest thing at the beginning was people just couldn't afford to eat healthy. And so we began with this passion to help people to be able to eat healthy. After a while, we just began to take on a little bit of a different perspective. Farmers started calling us, asking if we can come to their farms and help them out with getting their products to people. And so we started helping do that as far as our friends and everyone that wanted to order with us in the co-op just started and were interested in the farmers' products, so they would order it and we'd go down and get it and bring it up, and that's what we still do. Things took a drastic change about a year ago when the health department came in, and through some communication between them, they never answered one of our requests and letters to them back in December of 2007, and then we didn't hear anything again until December 1st last week, 2008, when we had a sheriff's department group, about 11, 12, I'm not sure, 13 men, come into our home. It was violent, it was belligerent, they didn't identify themselves, and especially to myself and my children who were upstairs, and they were very forceful in bringing us down the steps and taking us and keeping us in the back room of our living room for about approximately 6-7 hours, I'm not sure. And in the meantime, we had people with guns inside and outside, and cars, just a volume of cars just pulling in, and plainclothesmen getting out of the cars. And we don't even know where they even came into our house, because we were isolated, and people getting in and out of their cars and coming in and out, and just people all over our property outside, all over our property in the house as well. It was extremely traumatic. We teach our children to be peaceful with people, and we had many nights after that, very difficult time sleeping. Myself, I was up for 3 nights every night, and any little noise, I mean, even to this day, when we hear someone at the door, we're all jumping. We have practitioners that are helping us to work with us with regards to that.
And they also, with the stuff they confiscated, there was a lot of our personal food. They never distinguished between what was co-op and what was personal. They took personal property. They took my daughter-in-law's computer, which she communicates with her husband, who is in Iraq, serving this country.
They took food from our personal food, a year's supply of food for us, chicken, beef, lamb that we raise and for ourselves, and that's all gone. We have nothing with regards to that for the next year. They've also shut us down from ordering this co-op, which is literally prevented us from even ordering food for our family and feeding our family, even the staple items that we normally would eat. Our schooling, we school our children, plus I in school, and all of our schooling was on one computer. We've been shut down in that regards. We can't work in that. And just between the physical things that they took and the spiritual and emotional trauma they've caused in our lives, it's just our hope that somehow we can help others with this.
In the 1970s, President Jimmy Carter commissioned the Global 2000 report. The findings of the report blamed virtually all of the world problems on the population growth of non-white people. The report went on as far as recommending the elimination of at least 2 billion people in third world nations off the face of the earth by the year 2000 in order to restore Western supremacy. Interestingly enough, also in the 70s, the AIDS epidemic broke out, claiming huge amounts of life in third world nations, as well as amongst the growing black and Hispanic population of America. It was said that the virus originated from green monkeys in Africa and was later passed on to the local population through either acts of bestiality or through consuming them as food. From there on, AIDS spread like wildfire across the African continent and later on to the rest of the world, claiming millions of lives. However, the story was just a smokescreen. On June 2nd, 1988, the Los Angeles Times published an article refuting the idea that the human AIDS virus originated from green monkeys. It uncovered evidence that the DNA composition of AIDS was totally inconsistent with that of green monkeys. In fact, it could be proven that the AIDS virus could not be found anywhere in nature and could only have ever survived in the human biological system. If the virus did not exist anywhere in nature, the question is raised as to where exactly the virus all of a sudden stemmed from. On July 4th, 1984, the New Delhi newspaper in India called The Patriot published an article making the first detailed charges of AIDS as being a counter-biological warfare agent. An anonymous American anthropologist was quoted, claiming that AIDS was genetically engineered at the U.S. Army's Biological Warfare Laboratory at Fort Detrick near Frederick, Maryland. Then on October 30th, 1985, the Soviet journal Literaturная Gazeta repeated the charges made by the Indian newspaper, making it an international controversy. All this, however, was easily passed off as a communist rhetoric by the Masonic West. However, on October 26, 1986, the Sunday Express became the first Western newspaper to run a front-page story confirming the findings of the Indian and Soviet newspapers entitled AIDS Made in Lab Shop. The outbreak of AIDS has been linked to vaccine programs around the world. the internationally respected London Times newspaper published an article at the front page story on May 11, 1987, entitled "Smallpox Vaccine Triggered AIDS." The article establishes a direct correlation between the smallpox vaccine administered by the World Health Organization to an estimated 50 to 70 million people in different Central African countries and the subsequent outbreaks of AIDS in those regions. The World Health Organization is the medical wing of the United Nations. The evidence suggests that AIDS is a genetically engineered virus spread through vaccination programs in third world countries, germ warfare against the innocent and the weak, aimed at eliminating an entire populace off the face of the earth. AIDS is nothing other than the modern-day final solution, and all of this for the purpose of installing an economic policy that would give complete global domination to the Masonic West. However, for the Freemasons' economic domination on its own is not enough. In order to have Masonic governments at the head of global union, under complete Masonic control, an economic union may suffice, but to keep it there, they would need a military union, and that union would be none other than the UN.
You're sitting here and you are laughing about some of these problems. Are people going to look at this and say, I mean, he's sitting there just making jokes about money? How do you deal with it? I mean, explain your mood and your laughter.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be...
Are you punch drunk?
No, there's got to be a little gallows humor to get you through the day.
We've had to endure much, you and I, but soon there will be order again. A new age. Aquinas spoke of the mythical city on the hill. Soon that city will be a reality, and we will be crowned its kings. Not better than kings. Gods.
The pharma industry really cares about you and me. Pot will make you lazy. It'll make you go all crazy. So if you got arthritis, don't you go smoking weed. You breathe too much, you eat too much, just die already, please. And as for medications, herbs are dangerous. Just take your pharmaceuticals from doctors you can trust. We're causing global warming, the planet is a mess. We breathe too much, we eat too much, they're gonna get rid of us. Don't ever question why, don't even bother to try. It's all just one big lie. Whoopee, you're all gonna die. Don't ever question why, don't even bother to try.